Hey, everybody. Good morning. Going to talk about yesterday's coup attempt and what we're watching. And I have a few thoughts that I've been sitting on and kind of ruminating over about where we are, where we're going, and what we need to do to fix this whole shit show of a mess. Before we do, if you would, if you would just grant me a little bit of patience, I want to say something. Um, I I keep my personal details pretty closely guarded. And one of the reasons why that is because a lot of people close to me, a lot of loved ones, friends, and family have received incredible harassment and abuse, and they've been stalked and threatened over the past few years. And the reason I bring that up is I want to talk very, very quickly about how I even came to the point of being here, talking to you, doing this, speaking out against authoritarianism and fascism. I think it's important and relevant. I was just a normal sort of a dude back in 2015. I was a fiction writer, a professor, and I had a novel that had sort of spiraled out of control. So I thought for a lark, I would start covering politics. I didn't think anything was going to come from it. I just thought I was going to go to some rallies. I was going to write some columns. I looked up to Hunter S. Thompson. Who knew? Who knew exactly what it was going to be? And what ended up happening was I started going to Trump rallies. And, everyone thought it was a big lark. Everyone thought it was hilarious. It was entertainment. I mean, the cable news channels made a ton of money off of it, and they made a lot of ratings out of it. It was a pretty big deal for a hot minute. And I started going into Trump rallies, and almost immediately what I found out, and because I'm a white dude, and because I come from a place with a lot of white dudes like me and a lot of Trump supporters, people weren't afraid to say what they thought and what they believed around me. They would say all of their racist, misogynistic, fascistic bullshit to me. I reported it. I used Twitter and told people about it, and somehow or another that got through because nobody was reporting on this stuff because Trump was such an entertainment and such a ratings draw, and nobody was talking about who his supporters were and what they were actually about and what they actually believed. I got thrown into the deep end of the pool in 2016. I went into a Trump rally with like 1,500 followers, something like that, and I came out with tens of thousands, and all of a sudden I was like, I don't know what the hell's going on. I was trying to tell people left and right that there was something brewing within the Trump movement, something really, really dangerous and something malignant that was dangerous. And what I found out almost immediately was that if you say something in this country that actually starts to expose something wrong and something dangerous, a couple of things happen. One, you oftentimes get labeled a kook or hysterical or an alarmist. And I had some opportunities that grew up, and then other times it's like, well, you're going too far, you're talking about fascism and racism and white supremacy, it's too much, I'm sorry, good luck on your future endeavors. And all of a sudden some of those like media opportunities that I had in the very beginning started going away, because you have to be very, very careful about what you talk about and how you talk about this country and how you talk about its politics and its problems. The second thing that happened is that as my name started getting out there and as I started reporting on the Trump movement, there was an overwhelming wave of harassment that began. And it began among the alt-right, it began among white supremacists, neo-Nazis, and then on top of it, there were just a few people on there who, got their jollies out of it and, got a few retweets or likes or whatever. At first it was pretty disturbing, but then it took on a new level. The harassment went from people vocalizing threats and harassment to suddenly people showing up at my house. Suddenly people stalking me and the people I care about. People suddenly starting to, like, I don't know, send pictures of my house that they had taken that day, or, describing my movements or where I was going or what I was doing. They would send me emails and messages and call me on the phone and tell me how they were going to murder me and dismember me. And let me tell you something. I had people show up at my house multiple times. And what I would do is I would call the police, and the police would come, and they'd be like, "Oh, this is online stuff?" And I would show them the stuff. And they'd be like, "This is online stuff we're talking about here." And I think you all saw this too back in 2016, back when we were so naive. People left and right would be like, "Oh, this is just online bullshit. It's just a bunch of trolls, a bunch of people having fun, a bunch of people just, it doesn't mean anything. It's just its own thing." Which, by the way, it's important to point out that that's exactly what they were saying about Trump in the very beginning. I say all of this, and I appreciate you letting me get that off my chest, because what we're dealing with right here is we are dealing with a cultural crisis, and a large part of it has to do with the fact that we have an unregulated social media atmosphere where people can say and do anything they want. Anything they want. It is not a coincidence that yesterday, at this coup attempt, you had a ton of people who were either QAnon people or they were streaming to their online audiences. I've been talking a lot about grifts and coups, which, by the way, is Donald Trump in a nutshell, but it's also his supporters. It's also this movement in this country. And we have such a hard time understanding that the online world is real and that it's also dangerous. And by the way, I would be completely remiss, and we don't even have enough time to get into it today, about the fact that there are businesses who make all of their money based on making sure that people are given what they want online so that they're addicted to it, and that their information can be harvested and that they can be marketed to, and they spend more time addicted and more time in their own alternate realities. It's a major problem. That's a major problem, and one of the reasons why we're in this situation that we are. Yesterday was a grift that turned into a coup. It wasn't just, and I'm already shocked. And maybe I shouldn't allow myself to be shocked anymore, because this media is so terrible at talking about the problems in this country and what's going on in this country. I've got to leave over here. They want to believe that everything's good in America. And by the way, I was sickened last night by the speeches in the Senate. They were talking about, this isn't America. This isn't who we are. We're an exceptional country. And by the way, since I call it like it is, and I'm not going to play favorites or whatever, I thought Biden's speech was pretty piss poor. When Americans come together, we can do anything. No, we have to start looking in the mirror and understanding who we are. We have to start understanding who we are in this country. Which, by the way, while we're on that subject, the reason why I understood what was happening in the Trump rallies is because those people were my family. Those people were my neighbors. Those people were the people I grew up with and the people I know. And I love a lot of them. But I have to tell you that they've been talking about fascistic things for years, and racist things for years, and conspiracy theories for years. I was talking about this shit back in 2003 in the lead up to the Iraq War. And by the way, there's a lot of Republicans today who are like, "Oh my God, can you believe this Trump thing?" And those motherfuckers built this. Those people wanted an illegal war, and so they cultivated a cult of personality around George W. Bush, and they cultivated their Straussian mythology of a crusade going out and fighting the evildoers. They created this. Fox News created this. And by the way, Fox News knows it. Fox News is already like, well, I think those were probably some Antifa infiltrators who did this thing. We have a real problem in this country. And it's not going to just go away. American exceptionalism is not just going to scrub it all out. Yesterday, if we don't treat it like the coup attempt that it was, if there are not consequences, if there are not actual consequences and things done, it's going to be the beginning of something larger. It's not going to be a day that lives in infamy, which I think is what Schumer called it. It's going to be a precursor to something else. Because the people who marched on the Capitol yesterday, I said this yesterday, I want to say it was on the emergency podcast that we did, those were the true believers. Like, those were like the people close to Trump. A lot of them were the grifters who have made a lot of money off of Trump. The white supremacist, the white terrorist, the domestic terrorists, they're not true believers of Trump. They saw Trump as useful. But they do not actually believe that Trump is some sort of messiah. They're not making their nut off Trump. They're recruiting off Trump. But if those people get wind that there's an open opportunity for accelerationism, this stuff is infectious. It's infectious. And I think it's really important that we think about this in the digital space. Because when Trump was making his way towards his eventual nomination and election as president, he inspired a lot of people to follow in his wake. This is when you got the Cernoviches. I mean, even Alex Jones saw a path forward in this thing. You had a lot of online grifters who recognized the grift and they wanted to get in on the grift. You had a lot of people LARPing fascist. You had a lot of people doing that stuff. I mean, looking back now, it's just shocking that more people didn't recognize this thing. This breeds more insurrection. It breeds more violence. So I would say this. If we're going to get out of this thing with any sort of a functioning government, with any sort of a shared society, we need to take a look at our media. We need to take a look at, again, something like the fairness doctrine, but we also need to take a look at the possibility that, like, people who make money off of inspiring insurrection, whether or not they're cable companies, whether or not they're online grifters, they're people with platforms, people who are spreading QAnon bullshit, people who are spreading anti-vaccination bullshit, people who are spreading pandemic bullshit. Those people should be held accountable. Because you can't just buy a bunch of pitchforks and buy a bunch of torches and put them out in the street and talk about how the ruling elites and powerful are rejecting your voice in Congress and then point the direction towards Congress. I don't think the deplatform thing is enough. I'll be honest with you. Like, it's made inroads with people like Alex Jones, but I don't think that's enough. I really, really don't. I do not think that we can live in a society where people are openly and knowingly lying in order to make money off of this. It's a grift and it's a coup. And this is the problem, is that those two things are together right now. We have to start taking the online space seriously. And we're told not to, by the way. We're told not to by big tech because they want to keep it their purview. And everybody just have a good time. Don't worry about it. Why would you even question what's going on? And that's the other part of this puzzle, by the way, is big tech has to be held accountable as well. There's blood on Facebook's hands. There's blood on their hands right now. And they can silence Trump for 12 hours or whatever bullshit they're peddling today. There's blood on their hands. There are a lot of people who had to be complicit to lead to this situation. And a lot of people have to turn the other way for it to get to this point. Media members included. I'm disgusted today by how a lot of these outlets are dealing with it. I'm disgusted with how a lot of politicians and a lot of pundits are dealing with it. I'm truly disgusted. I'll be honest with you. And it's very familiar to me. It feels like standing there and someone saying, "Oh, we're talking about online stuff?" We're talking about online stuff? Oh, come on now. Come on. We're talking about online stuff? Yeah, we're talking about online stuff. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about people streaming themselves as they break into the Capitol, destroy things, attack police, and go into offices and occupy offices. And I have to tell you something. This is a really important thing to think about. Thank God the members of Congress were evacuated the way they were. Because this whole live action role playing bullshit that these people are doing, there were some people yesterday who meant business. If they would have come across members of Congress, particularly Democrats, we're talking about Pelosi, we're talking about Ocasio-Cortez, yesterday might have gone a lot differently. Yesterday might have gone a lot differently. Because you get in the room, and by the way, we have this really convenient way of looking at reality and how it works. And everyone just thinks, oh, people decide what they're going to do, they premeditate, and then they go and do it. No, you know what happens in grifts like this? It's like jazz. They're totally improvising the entire time. That's what Trump has been doing. Trump doesn't plan anything. He just reacts to things, and he keeps looking for openings and his best possible move forward. He's been playing a demagogue. He is a fascist internally in his beliefs and his worldview. But he's just been making it up as he goes along. It's a big, giant grift, make-believe game. And if you think for a second that some of the people who broke into the Capitol yesterday, if they would have come across the right members of Congress, if you think there wasn't a potential for violence, murder, executions, kidnapping, my God. Some of these assholes thought about kidnapping the governor of Michigan and holding a mock trial and possibly executing her. What else do we have to do? These other people are LARPing in Georgia, talking about taking over the government, and my God, what? They arrested like 4 of them during the Obama administration. We have the base in this country, which is basically just live action role playing until all of a sudden, hey, it turns out you're a domestic terrorist. Because that's what happens. When you play make-believe like this, when you LARP like this, when you play a role like this, all of a sudden you stop playing the role, and it's just you. I wrote about this in the memoir that I wrote. Men do it all the time. They put on a costume, and they play the role until they're not playing the role anymore, until they're just like an abusive, awful person. It's a bunch of people trying to project a character that they wish that they were until they're that person. That's what's going on in this country. That's why people are driving around in big giant pickup trucks with Punisher skulls, and they're wearing like fascistic t-shirts and drinking fascistic coffee. They're role playing until it's time to play the role. This isn't going to stop. Particularly if people keep pretending like it's just an isolated incident. Oh, it wasn't really a coup. It was a riot that spilled into the Capitol. Come on. We got to be careful with our words here. Those of us who have been predicting this, it wasn't hard. That's the thing that pisses me off, man. I was thrown into the deep end of the pool in 2016. I had to figure it out as I went along. And the reason I did is because I was like, God, this whole thing is very, very weird. It feels like something's going on here. Maybe I should learn what's going on. And so I just threw myself into it, and I had to learn. And so I learned. And it was all there. I mean, it's I have a few novel ideas, but I have to tell you that most of the stuff is on the records. You just got to read the right books, read the right articles, read the right people. It's all there. None of this was hard to predict. And when I talked to the other people who predicted this whole thing, everybody's just like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I was just telling you what was out there and what was brewing and what was happening. I've been trying to tell people now for a while, we're in real trouble unless we take this thing seriously. Yesterday should be the moment where finally everyone's like, all right, we got to actually look in the mirror and think about this. It should be the rock bottom. It should be the moment of clarity for the country. That they're terrified of calling out racism and white supremacy and fascism. because they want to talk about America and how this is not who we are. And when America comes together, we can do anything, man. This is the country that landed on the moon. This is the country that fought on D-Day, or whatever in the hell they want to do. Eagles flying, fireworks going off, hands across America. America's sick, man. America is sick, and it's big, and it's weird, and it's complicated. And it's about time we stop looking for easy answers. It's about time that we stop looking for platitudes. It's about time we stop looking at symbols and we actually start thinking about the complicated nature of our society and power in this society. By the way, a totally different conversation that we have to have at some point is the fact that a lot of this has to do, a lot of the radicalization has to do with alienation from this late capitalistic system that we have. That's a different thing. That's a different thing. That's part of the solution, by the way, is actually improving material conditions in this country and the political situation in this country. That's a completely different conversation, but it's part of it. But people better get serious about this. I naively yesterday when this was going down, I was like, well, at least finally people will take this seriously. And then immediately, just clockwork, they just started explaining it away. It's about time we rescue ourselves. That's exactly right. I cannot believe that it was 24 hours ago we were sitting here talking about the Georgia victories. Feels like a week has passed. I feel aged. Talk to people. Tell them what's going on. Tell them what you've learned. Tell them what you figured out. Have conversations with people. Do not let people go back to sleep after this. There's a problem that happens with things like this, and I was talking about it on Twitter. It's like McVeigh, and he detonated it at the Oklahoma City bombing. He was like this disturbed individual. Meanwhile, he was a member of a giant white terrorist conspiracy, and everyone just let white supremacy and white terrorism and that whole giant movement, they were just like, don't worry about that. Just deal with this guy. We'll deal with this guy and that over there. That's fine. Don't worry about that. There's no larger thing that we need to worry about. You can't let people go to sleep. You have to tell people what's going on. You have to let them know that this is not an isolated incident. You need to let people know that there is a history of incidents like this that lead to larger incidents. I don't know what Trump's going to do. Again, Trump's just playing jazz all the time. He's just trying to figure out what, he's just going to react to it. I mean, I by the time his Twitter gets unlocked or his Facebook gets unlocked, I assume by now he's already convinced himself of this conspiracy theory that Antifa members were part of this, or it was a big psyop or whatever. I almost guarantee that. That's where that thing is going to go. Whether or not he's going to order more people to attack a Capitol or attack other people. I mean, it's probably who he is. I mean, that's been his MO. That's been his instinct all along. So I don't think he's going to suddenly, be declawed or anything. And there are people in this country who have a lot to gain. And do not forget for a second, that fascism always partners with hypercapitalist when the system becomes disturbed or threatened, and there starts being a conversation about left-wing solutions such as socialism and or redistributive justice. They always turn to fascist. They're always in league with one another. Always. Trump, and by the way, I'll just say this before I wrap this thing up. Trump should be impeached. He should be removed from office, and he should be arrested. The fact that that isn't already underway is an indictment of this system. And people want to pretend like, oh, just give it a few more days. We've only got basically 2 weeks to go. No, I don't care if he doesn't do anything else. I don't care if we don't hear from him for the next 13 days. He's committed the act of sedition. It's not going to settle down. I'm sorry. I tried saying this yesterday. This may feel like a nightmare, but you're awake. This is happening. There's no pinching yourself to get out of this nightmare. Like, this is where we are. And you can't just bury your head in the sand. You can't just go back to sleep. You can't pretend like this isn't real. It's time we took a long, hard look in the mirror. And it is a long time coming. It is a long time coming. I'm very pissed off and very frustrated. And I'm still hopeful. I'm still appreciative of all of you. But my God, we have a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. I keep saying it. It's the way I sign off on the Muckrake podcast. But I mean it. It's legitimate. Be safe. There are tons of possibilities of copycat situations. A lot of people were emboldened yesterday. A lot of people saw yesterday as a major victory and saw the possibility that they can attack the federal apparatus and possibly people around them. And by the way, they'll be welcomed in and then they'll be welcomed out. They'll take some selfies and some high fives and, no harm, no foul, right? So just put it in proper context because our media doesn't want to do it. The same toxic, poisonous stew. Just a little over a week ago, a dude blew himself up in Nashville. Bombed downtown Nashville. By the way, before that, but we're not good at context in this country. I just want to forget how things were going. We had neo-Nazis who marched on Charlottesville. We have people left and right getting murdered by the alt-right and the far right. Then, we have people being intimidated. We also have a guy who sent a bunch of bombs to Democratic leadership in the media. All connected. It all goes forward. There's a larger problem here. Can't go back to sleep. I'm sorry. It's not a nightmare. Appreciate you. Appreciate you a lot. I'll answer that real fast. I think that's a good thing, and then we'll sign off. Judy and David Chin said, how did I start thinking differently from my friends and family around me? There's a couple of answers to this real fast, and I think this is important for the moment. One is I was always a little bit of an outsider, but I think it's important to point out that everybody's a little bit of an outsider. I was lucky that I had support from a few key people, my mom, my grandfather, and a couple of friends. And they were people who told me I didn't have to buy into like the masculine, racist, fascistic bullshit. There were moments where I felt very alone and very afraid and very weird and like a complete outsider. And there were times where I played the role. I mean, look at me. Like, I didn't just end up like this. Like, there's a part of me that still has remnants of this old, good old boy persona that I had to play for years. But eventually I reached a point where it was that moment of clarity. I was like, I don't want to live like this anymore. I want to be a better person. I want to be a healthier person. And on top of that, it didn't hurt that I was reading and thinking about this stuff. I want to say probably the defining moment for me, at least in order to start breaking away from this stuff, was in 2003. When I started watching the buildup to the Iraq War, and I was like, there's something wrong here. There's something off here. And then I started educating myself, and I started understanding how we had arrived at the point and what it meant. But a big part of it, and if you want to walk away with a lesson on this, here's a couple of lessons. One, you're less likely to be radical if you're not alone. I've talked to a lot of former white supremacist and neo-Nazi people who recruited people, and they'll tell you left and right. One of them, the one that sticks out in my mind, Christian Piccolini, and he told me just straight up, he was like, we look for alienated, lonely white men who have nothing to lose. And we tell them, hey, I know you feel alone and powerless. Don't worry. You're not alone and you're not powerless. Come join us. Put it on an armband. And by the way, that's what fascism is. It's a bunch of weak men who are terrified, who band together and pretend like they're not terrified and they're stronger than death and everything else. We have to, and by the way, the internet, going back to what I was talking about, the internet and capitalism and rampant inequality and political inequality has led to a point where a lot of people feel powerless and they feel alone, and it allows them to be radicalized and weaponized. We got to work on that too. We got to work on that too. We got to start rebuilding society. We have to work against alienation. We have to work on the material conditions of people's lives. We have to talk to people. We got to talk to people. We got to rebuild that. And the internet has made it feel like we can't actually talk to people and we can't have conversations. I keep saying this all the time. I have family. I was thinking about this yesterday a lot. I wasn't planning on talking about this today, but I'll talk about it. I have a family member who has become radicalized over the past couple of years and shares just the most unbelievable memes and has the most unbelievable opinions. Trump, of course, is touched by God. Whites are the most discriminated against group in the country. And I've seen these memes and things. I've seen them grow and worsen to the point where it's like pictures of like militia members getting in a truck saying, "Get in, we're about to do patriot shit," which should ring pretty true today. And I was trying to tell people this a while back that I didn't know why that was happening. And then all of a sudden I had a moment where I was like, I think maybe they're going through something. And I haven't talked to this person in a while. And so I reached out to this person, this family member, and I said, "Hey, is everything cool? Is everything good?" And I found out that everything was not cool and everything was not good. And that there was a whole litany of personal and economic crises that were happening in their lives. And all of a sudden I started to realize that they were isolated as well. And they were finding their power through all of this stuff. This is not just a fascistic problem in this country. It is a mental health crisis. It is an alienation crisis. Big business and the powerful and the wealthy have created conditions where people feel completely alone and without anything that they can possibly do. And there are so many people, including Donald Trump and including the assholes who broke into the Capitol yesterday and were streaming to all their people. There are tons of grifters who are making money off of the fact that these people are alone, isolated, and afraid, and that they feel powerless. You want to feel powerful? Put on an armband. Storm the Capitol. We have a big problem in this country. And if I see another person pretend like yesterday is like the high water mark and it's not going to get any worse, I'm going to scream. We have a big problem in this country. And there are a lot of things we can do about it. We can take on a lot of conditions that have created this. We can de-radicalize people. We can turn down the temperature. It's not about reaching across the aisle. It's not about singing, songs together and linking arms and taking knees in Congress or whatever. It's about actually making people's lives better. And it's about holding people accountable who are going to bring people to violence through demagoguery. It can get better. But as long as people are in denial of it, it's not going to get better. It's just going to fester. It's just going to grow more and more malignant. I'm tired and I'm pissed off. Should be better than this. We deserve better than this. Tell people what's going on. Let them know what's going on. Call somebody today. Make them talk about it. I was talking about this with Pete Dominic the other day. We have a problem in this country where everybody just wants to pretend like everything is fine, and they don't want to talk about what's actually going on. They just want to like shove it down and just, swallow it down. Talk to somebody about it. And don't just talk about talking points and just be like, wasn't it terrible what happened yesterday? Yes, it was. How's your day? Do not pretend like a coup didn't happen yesterday. Have actual conversations. Engage in intimacy. That's one of the things that this country is missing. Intimacy, honesty, humanity, back and forth. We're really, really in a bad place. And alienation is at the center of most of it. Have conversations with people, because there are a lot of people who should know better and who should be holding people accountable. And they're like, oh my God, that's very disturbing what happened yesterday. It makes me feel very uncomfortable. I'm just going to ignore it and go do something else. It was a pooch. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. If you don't want this country to be taken over, and by the way, I said this yesterday on the podcast. Do you know what these people want? Look up the day of the rope. Look up the day of the rope. They were telling me this back in 2016 when they were harassing me and the people around me. They were telling me about the Day of the Rope, and I was like, what in the hell is the Day of the Rope? The Day of the Rope is a fictional event in the Turner Diaries, which, by the way, is these people's Bible. They want to drag the left, liberals, media members, people of color. They want to drag them out in the street, and they want to ceremoniously hang everybody and execute them. That's legitimately what they want. And I tried to talk to some of these people when they were harassing me, and I was like, oh, you're not serious about this. Let's have an actual conversation. And they're like, I am serious. There are people in this country, and I mean this. I've been sent pictures of them. There are people in this country who are so dead serious about this. Are you ready? Because I don't talk about this, but I'll talk about it now. There are people in this country who build execution chambers. There are people in this country who have built gas chambers because they're LARPing a fascistic lifestyle, and they are champing at the bit to use them. If you, oh God, I didn't plan on talking about this stuff. If you think that it's just a coincidence that America, for years and years and years, while we're prosecuting forever wars, that you couldn't turn on the TV without finding a show about Hitler or the Nazis, you think that was a coincidence? You think it's weird that for years, this country was awash in popular culture that focused on Nazis and Hitler? That wasn't a coincidence. It reflected the state of mind. You had a ton of people who felt powerless and alone, just like the Nazis. The people who got recruited into the Nazis, because we like to pretend that fascism is about strength, and it's not. It takes place in countries where there are crises. And so what do? They recruit a bunch of young men who have nothing else to do. Put it on an armband. Put it on an armband. Feel strong. It is not a coincidence that we are here. It didn't just happen. And by the way, if you watch one of those Nazi shows, you watch one of those Hitler shows that everybody is really, really proud of and really into, it's really weird. All of a sudden, Hitler just started giving speeches, and people just started showing up. What a charismatic orator! He just hypnotized an entire population. No, that's not what happened. That's not how fascism occurred. Fascism was a reaction to economic and political and societal crisis in countries that had myths of exceptionalism, powered by conspiracy theories, and by the way, given aid, comfort, and direction by the wealthy and the powerful who wanted to put down socialism and leftists. If that doesn't make the hair stand up on the back of your neck, if that doesn't make you realize how our situation right now mirrors that moment, then you are desperate to live in denial. And I have to tell you, it's not fun. I don't want to sit here and talk about this stuff. I'm really happy with what I've been able to do over the past couple of years. I'm very proud of what I've been able to do. I'm fucking tired. I wish that it wasn't like this. I wish it wasn't. And I know that you do too. And oh my God, I wish I could live in denial like I did before this thing. I was one of those people who was not, I understood that politics was problematic. I understood there was problems in culture. I was a pretty typical liberal. I wanted to make things better. But I didn't understand the depth of it. And when you see it, you can't unsee it. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry that that's true, and I'm sorry that there aren't easy answers besides the fact that we are in a moment of political, societal, existential crisis. And if we don't deal with it, If we don't deal with it, it's going to get worse. It's going to get a whole lot worse. All right, everyone. I'm out of coffee. I'm going to get some more. Please be safe. We can turn this thing around. We can make it better. But we gotta take a long look in the mirror. We gotta take a long, serious look in the mirror. We can do it. We can make the country better. And not only can we defeat fascism, we can make our lives better. We can make our society better. We can live better lives. We can live fairer lives. We can have a better, fairer, more human country. And the alternative is too awful to even think about, to even actually entertain, because this train doesn't stop. Like, where we're at right now is not the pause. It's not where life is going to be later and later and later on. Like, I'm telling you, the oppression that you're feeling right now is only going to grow. And the alienation and the radicalization is only going to grow. So we have no choice. We have to fight this thing. We have to make the world better. And we're going to do that. Again, be safe.